I'm Dr. Mort Cooper, your host on Change Your Voice, Change Your Life. In studio with me is my guest, Dr. John Curtis, and he is quite taken with the topic that we have brought to you. We have, in this instance, combined our various talents, and the title of Part 1 and Part 2.
It's Desperate Voices.
Okay. Now, what we're talking about, folks, desperate voices are those who have the strangle voice. I can't talk. It's called spasmodic dysphonia, and a gentleman by the name of Scott Adams, who does Dilbert, a cartoon feature in newspapers, you may read it, is one among many who suffers this problem, and the problem is all over the dial if you listen.
Well, the interesting part about the article was that the reporter, who discussed Scott Adams' treatment. Mm-hmm. He had Botox injections, apparently, didn't really give him very much help in terms of recovering his voice. Now, Botox is, the manufacturer Allergan has claimed that their treatment is 99% effective.
No, it's not only Allergan, it's the medical doctors, the top medics in the country.
Yeah, and are you finding that true in your own clinical practice?
I find it laughable. I don't say that without clinical evidence. I have emails, calls, I have letters, and these people with strangled voices are telling me in no uncertain terms that despite the fact they were told it's an effective treatment, 99%, it's not. They lose their voices for various periods of time. It's a roller coaster ride. And the problem is that I am finding that the Botox voice is more hype than reality from my clinical experience.
Would you say that the medical profession today in treating Scott Adams and others, including other noteworthy people in the media like Diane Rehm, who was also treated for this condition of strangled voice, that they believe that they are getting state-of-the-art treatment by receiving Botox injections from their physicians?
They can believe anything they want.
No, but is that correct, that to the medical profession, Botox is the state-of-the-art treatment?
To the medical profession, it's the state-of-the-art and the treatment of choice medically. But the medics haven't had one single cure of spasmodic dysphonia in 135 years since Trow first described it in 1871. The medical community is not trained to understand the speaking voice, practical speaking voice, and what to do for it. They are not trained.
Why do you think the industry, after so many years, is so backward today?
The medical treatment is not all there. The medics are not trained to listen to voices, and that's coming out in the forthcoming book that we wrote called, the title of the book that we co-authored?
I think it's Cures of Hopeless Voices.
Curing Hopeless Voices.
I think unless you've changed it.
Curing Hopeless Voices called Strangled Voices called Spasmodic Dysphonia.
Well, that's exactly the diagnosis that was given to Scott Adams.
That's right.
And to many others. But what's interesting in that article, I don't know what your take is on this, is that they reported through a gentleman, I don't know, are you familiar with a Chris Udepsky?
Well, I got Chris Zdebski, his scholarship.
He was quoted in this AP
Santa
article.
Barbara. I know Chris Zdebski.
This was by Rachel Conrad on the AP. It came out, I believe it was 2 days ago. Could have been 3 days ago. Around the 29th, 30th maybe. And in this article, she's very facile, very comfortable talking about Botox as the answer to spasmodic dysphonia.
No, he is. He says he has seen 800 cases of spasmodic dysphonia, but what he fails to tell the writer is that he's never had a single cure of the condition, not one. And he's part of a group up in San Francisco that did the surgical procedure, and that surgical procedure by Herb Dito, who is well-intentioned, and so is Chris Zdebski, well-intentioned, but it left 2/3 of those worse off after the surgical procedure than before, and that's in the American Speech Hearing Language Association website.
Now, one of the arguments in favor of Botox treatment is it's less draconic than a surgery. Do you accept the notion that simply administering Botox shots is a preferable approach to surgery because the effects, according to the manufacturer, Allergan, are temporary?
I believe that if you take that to heart, that Botox is less draconic and barbarian than surgical procedures for spasmodic dysphonia, there is a point to it. But the outcome of what's happening with Botox for spasmodic dysphonia, the vocal cords, is so far afield from what the hype is of 99% effective that it's laughable.
Would you agree in principle with the idea that if Botox is a neurotoxin,
it paralyzes,
and it paralyzes acetylcholine in the muscle tissue, okay, prevents it from muscles from contracting, would you agree that it's effective in doing that?
It paralyzes. What the medics tell the patients, it relaxes the vocal
So you would
cords.
agree that it's 99% effective in paralyzing muscle tissue?
No, not 99%. It is effective in a majority of cases to paralyze the vocal cords. There are cases like we have on a DVD where the individual reports that his spasms never stopped despite repeated ongoing Botox shots. So there is a difference of view. I believe that Botoxed voices basically will endure a paralysis of the vocal cord or cords from Botox.
Right.
But it's not 99% of the time that this is going to happen. The percentage of when it happens, I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows, except that there are individual findings, but they may be somewhat off balance. The medical profession is saying essentially that this is a state-of-the-art treatment of choice, and they're not looking at the off-balance outcomes of Botox.
Well, they're even saying that I think the condition of spasmodic dysphonia, which I believe for 90 years was regarded as a psychiatric condition, and then they switched somewhere around 1960 to believe that it's a neurological condition. Today, there are even some physicians that refer to it as spasmodic dystonia. So are you of the view that Botox, let's back up, that spasmodic dysphonia is actually a dystonia or a intractable neurological condition?
No, that's nonsense. The reason the medical community has never had a single cure of spasmodic dysphonia, or you call it spasmodic dystonia, whatever you call it, is because this is not a medical problem. It's not a gene-related problem. It's not a neurological problem. And it's not a problem that can be solved by the medical profession. The medical profession has treated spasmodic dysphonia, whatever you want to call it, from 1871 as a medical problem, first as a psychiatric problem, and they've never reported a single cure in all the literature that I know of. In 1960, Rowe, Brumlick, and Moore came up with the belief, but it's not documented, that it's a neurological problem, suggesting 4 of 10 cases that they saw that it may be a neurological problem because there was some static in some lobes of the brain. But they were not looking at the fact that when you misuse your voice, I talk like that you can create functionally and mechanically the spasming in different lobes of the brain, as you can create eye spasms, neck spasms, back spasms, if you misuse your voice horribly, as these patients are doing. The problem with spasmodic dysphonia, Dr. Curtis, is that it cannot be a neurological problem, it cannot be a gene-related problem, it cannot be a disease, and it cannot be a medical problem, because I can change it in seconds directly by simple, remarkable exercises.
Yeah. And do you know who Dr. Leslie Glaze is?
Oh, yes. She's the coordinator of Division 3, which is the voice of the American Speech Hearing Language Association.
That's the voice division of your national association.
Yeah, that's the division of, there are about 125,000 people in this association. Okay. And this Division 3 is the voice section. They have about 1,000 members.
Now, she told me that her belief is of the patients that you're claiming that you've cured of spasmodic dysphonia, that you've actually treated muscle tension disorder. Do you have an answer for Dr. Glaze who suggests that your patients that were diagnosed independently of yourself with SD, spasmodic dysphonia, were actually muscle tension disorder?
The cases I have seen and reporting cures on have been diagnosed by the cream creme de la creme, the top doctors in the country at UCLA Medical Center, Scripps, Vanderbilt, you name it, the Mayo Clinic, and the list goes on. So if Dr. Glaze is of the view that I'm not treating spasmodic dysphonia,
Right.
then she's impugning, in my estimate, the competence of the physicians at the top medical centers, the top experts in ear, nose, and throat and in neurology, saying that they are incompetent to judge spasmodic dysphonia, which I have their medical records and charts diagnosing spasmodic dysphonia and curing these conditions. Now, the next step I think you might want to ask me, which is very interesting, how can I cure a neurological problem that is being written on the chart as a neurological problem or a disease?
Well, yes, that is another question, is how is it possible for you, who's not a neurologist, to
I'm a PhD,
to reverse a neurological condition?
I can't. Then you have to ask yourself, and the public has to ask themselves, how can one doctor in the world report ongoing cures of neurological diagnosed spasmodic dysphonia by the creme de la creme in the country and the world? The answer is very simple. It's very simple. The condition is not medical, it's not neurological, it's not a disease, it's a mechanical breakdown, a functional breakdown of the voice, and therefore when I repair it and take the voice out of the lower throat and place it up into the face and give midsection breath support, it's curable, and I'm reporting ongoing cures. 16 cures alone at UCLA Medical Center, covering 35 years.
So there's really nothing mysterious about what you're doing, and you've been...
Absolutely not.
And isn't it true that over the years that even though they've attributed a certain type of wizardry or guru status to your work because of the results that you've gotten, isn't it also true, and really from the bottom of your heart, that you've opened up everything that you've done and you've put it out in a series of books where no holds have been barred? You have not restrained any information or kept any secret from the public as to how you work with these patients.
That's correct. I've opened the Pandora box. But there's another point, and it's a very important point to make. The medical community is well-intentioned in what they're doing, but they're treating this condition, spasmodic dysphonia, as a medical problem. They're not trained in practical voice, so they don't listen to voices, and they don't understand why the vocal cords are spasming, and they're believing that it's due to a neurological or disease entity, which it is not. I can cure the condition with cooperative patients, but I need the cooperation of the patient. And I report ongoing cures because what I'm doing is taking the voice out of the lower throat. All strangled voices, spasmodic dysphonia, all of them, the medical community and I agree on. It's the one basic point we agree on. All of these voices are in the lower throat, all of them. And what I do is I take the voice out of the lower throat with a very simple, remarkable procedure. It's so simple, it's mind-boggling. I developed it in 1962 on the staff at UCLA Medical Center. It's called the technique. And when you go you're talking like this, and you go the voice goes right to the face where all good and great voices are. Now, I developed a backup technique for dummies who can't get it. It's called the C-spot, the Cooper C-spot. If you take your finger and put it at the bottom of your breastbone, the soft tissue is the top of the stomach, and you go, are you talking like that? The voice will break and be normal in your face.
Is that what you call a voice lift?
Yeah, it's a natural voice lift.
Well, why is it that a physician out of Pennsylvania named Robert Sadeloff uses the term that he's giving patients voice lifts?
Well, he is. He's trying to do it, but he's doing it surgically.
But he's using...
And so is Peek Wu, another top ear, nose,
he's
and throat
using
doctor.
collagen.
Yes, and Peek Wu is using cadaver skin.
Well, how is it possible that you can give a voice lift without giving the implant, the collagen, or the cadaver tissue?
The implant is a non-essential approach, in my opinion. When you do implants, you're doing surgery, and ear, nose, and throat doctors are trained in surgery. That's what they do. That's what they're trained to do. That's what they continue to do. These problems are non-surgical problems. That's my position. And spasmodic dysphonia is a non-surgical problem, but they're draconic and barbaric in a sense, doing these surgeries that Dito, who developed this in the early 1970s, the American Speech Hearing Language Association has said 2/3 of those surgeries have left the patients with spasmodic dysphonia worse off after the surgery than before. I don't find that the percentage lessening.
Well, Dr. Dito is a very fine surgeon, as you know.
They're all fine.
He knows his techniques.
He knows the technique. Dr. Curtis, they're all fine physicians. They're all fine surgeons. The problem is they're dealing with a problem that's not a medical problem. And in my estimate, my clinical findings, it's overkill.
So why do you think that your profession, speech pathology profession, pretty much refuses to give the other side of the story?
Because I believe they're controlled by outside forces. The National Spasmodic Dysphonic Association is the only source that reviewed in 1994 for the American Speech Language Hearing Association, the group I'm in, the only source that reviewed the position on spasmodic dysphonia for the American Speech and Hearing Association. The National Spasmodic Dysphonic Association is a 501c, and they get a generous grant of money from Allergan, the maker of Botox. Now, if you're not talking about a one-sided situation, you're talking about a circus that's going on.
So it's really the influence of a publicly major, multinational drug maker, pharmaceutical company, that's seemed to have a big influence on the current state of affairs in this field.
Well, Merck is another one. In 1992, I believe it is, 1992 and 1994, they sponsored a study on bad and raspy voices, and they found that it's due to acid reflux. They happened to be producing at that time Prilosec. Today, the medical community believes that acid reflux is causing spasmodic dysphonia. So they've moved it from bad, raspy to strangled voices. There are approximately, in my opinion, in this country of 300 million people, perhaps 25% of the population with bad, raspy, and spasmodic dysphonia voices. Perhaps 1% of our population of 300 million suffers spasmodic dysphonia. It's the same percentage as stutters.
Why does Udepsky, in this article that came out, indicate that the incidence is somewhere around 25 or
30,000? They want to make it arcane and mysterious. It's not. The National Spasmodic Dysphonic Association, in writing in their newsletter, which is sponsored by Allergan, the maker of Botox, years back said there are 50,000 to 500,000. Now they're making it to 30,000. You can take any figure off the wall and say that's what it is, but it's not so from my clinical experience.
Well, do you think that there's any reason why patients who have this condition believe that this is a very rare disease that somehow has come over them like the plague, like it of an unknown origin and cause, and somehow that there's no treatments? Why is it there's resistance in the field for a treatment that works?
Because the doctors wear white jackets. I was at UCLA for 8 years on the staff and faculty. I ran the voice and speech clinic for the UCLA Medical Center when I was on the faculty, with the highest accolades from the chairman. The white jacket influences the American public excessively, extensively.
Do they influence newspapers?
They influence everybody. And then drug companies have a major influence. 96% of all drug studies are sponsored by drug companies, and they can vet what you find or what I read.
Well, I know that you've reported in your manuscript, the book that's coming out.
But you're the co-author of it.
Well, I know. You've provided studies in there or articles from the New York Times.
Yes.
Do you find that there's a degree of intellectual honesty at the New York Times with respect to reporting accurate information, two-sided, both balanced information about the strangled voice?
No, absolutely not.
So it's not balanced.
I don't talk in terms of absolutes. I never do. In this case, I do.
So it's not balanced information that you've gotten from the New York Times?
It's totally unbalanced. Totally.
So whose position are they taking?
It's frightening to what extent the New York Times will ballyhoo Botox and surgery. Now, Jane E. Brody in 1992 wrote a column, and she refers to the NSDA, the National Spasmodic Dysphonic Association, that gets a generous donation of money from Allergan, the maker of Botox, as a source to go to. And there's another source, the Dystonia Medical Group, which is also getting a generous donation grant of money from Allergan, the maker of Botox. They both say they guarantee there are no cures of spasmodic dysphonia. I'm reporting ongoing cures of spasmodic dysphonia. Now, coming back to the New York Times, in 1992, Brody said that speech therapy doesn't work. That's absolutely true. And she refused, after that article, to correct the issue and allow cures in on a two-sided presentation that there is another approach, and it's called direct voice rehabilitation, which doesn't play games, and it's remarkably simple in what I'm doing with a humming technique. But she refuses, and so does the New York Times in March 2nd, 2003, on the front page, Sunday edition, said blatantly, do you know what the quote was? Botox is giving those with spastic vocal cords back their voices. It's a quote. That's blatant.
Where did that quote come from? Did they reference the individual that
Donald
gave it?
G. McNeil wrote the article. He has no backup for it. I got in touch with him, and he gave me some, I'm sorry to tell you, a cockamamie source which had nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do with what the statement was.
What did that lead you to believe?
Well, it made me laugh that the New York Times is so unbalanced.
Well, they've had a problem.
It's frightening.
They've had a problem with certain reporters in recent years that's been quite serious. I mean, I don't know if you recall Jason Blair reporting
Judith
on
Miller and so forth. This is a story
But I mean,
that
that's
is so out of balance. It's I don't use absolutes. This is an absolute unkind cut by the New York Times.
So you're not willing to generalize at all in terms of other reporting by the New York Times.
No.
What you can speak about is in your field that you're familiar with is reporting that is not balanced, that is not factual, and that is not giving two sides of the story.
The New York Times has no awareness of what's going on with spasmodic dysphonia and the other side of there being cures of this condition. They adamantly accept the medical position that there are no cures. They are absolutely right. There are no medical cures. There are no speech therapy cures ever. But there are ongoing cures by direct voice rehabilitation, which I've discovered and used to help cure this condition.
Well, it seems to me that in the New York Times article that you're referring to, which is the one by Donald G. McNeil, Jr., that he made a very categorical, powerful statement about Botox giving patients with spastic vocal cords back their voices. And yet he could not substantiate where that quote came from.
That's correct.
Do you have any speculation as to where it might have come from?
I don't like speculation. I prefer absolutes where are there cures of a condition or not.
But is it possible that that quote and the information that, and you remember the GIGO, garbage in, garbage out phenomenon, okay, that it's possible that his sourcing was from a representative from the drug maker Allergan, the maker of Botox. Is it possible?
It is possible. They refuse to tell me what their source is for that statement. Okay. And the source they gave me from Donald G. McNeil Jr. is absolutely...
Well, it was a journal article.
Yes.
Right?
Irrelevant.
Okay.
I wrote to them.
All right. Now, we do know that there have been other articles written in the New York Times that you've observed yourself in which they have quoted heavily from a MD from the New York area who has a lot of familiarity, in fact, is an employee of the drug maker Allergan, although he doesn't identify himself as an employee.
That you're saying that's on the
so
internet.
in other articles that have appeared in the New York Times, they have quoted and referenced heavily Mitchell F. Brin.
He's a neurologist.
From New York.
He brought Botox to the field in 1984. Okay. And they use Botox once a year or possibly twice a year. Now they're using it 4 to 10 times a year and more each and every year for life at $1,000 to $4,000 per shot. It's not bad. You might call it Dr. Moneybags.
Is it? Now I recall that there was an article,
but no cures.
Now you correct me if I'm wrong about this. I recall seeing an article that was quoting Dr. Brin.
He's now a vice president of development for Allergan, the maker of
product
Botox.
Development. That he was quoted as saying that Botox is the next penicillin.
Yes, that was in the same article.
Now, don't you find the two events rather inconsistent? That he cannot find the quote or the reference?
G. McNeil.
for that, but he's saying that
Donald G. McNeil may have some amnesia. He may have a memory problem. He may have an auditory problem. The fact is that he doesn't have an attribution for what he wrote, and what he sent back to me was totally irrelevant as to the backup that Botox is giving those with spastic vocal cords back their voices. That's a nonsensical statement. That's an absolute...
well, it's nonsensical in the context of that your clinical experience tells you that it's not giving patients. But in terms of the manufacturer, Allergan, that is one of their claims about the product in the use for treating spasmodic dysphonia. Mm-hmm. So that's not an out, because I remember you asked the New York Times to review this, and they told you that in effect they found the statement to be consistent and nothing unusual about the statement.
No, they thereafter sent me literature saying that this is the state of the medical view, that Botox is doing what he said, but he has no name to back up the statement.
I'm not talking about McNeil. I'm talking about his supervisor who reviewed this.
Oh, that
yes.
is the assistant
and
editor Corcoran.
He found nothing.
He says, as far as I can tell.
As far as he can tell.
Yeah, the assistant in the Science Times. As far as I can tell, the statement Botox is giving those back with spastic vocal cords back their voices. As far as I can tell, I wrote him. How can you tell? You have no experience. You don't know what to listen for. The New York Times is stonewalling cures. And they're in deep doo-doo, in my opinion. I wrote to Sulzberger, who's the owner of the New York Times, and senior, and to Bill Keller and the rest of the crew there, that they're out to lunch. There's no question, in my opinion. They are out to lunch, and they're walking a plank they don't understand.
Well, they're also...
You want to sum it up?
Well, look, it's desperate voices, and I think that people like Scott Adams are, in fact, desperate.
Who does Dilbert, yeah.
He can't get his voice back.
Well, he tried Botox. It didn't work. He got off it.
His speaking engagements, he's had to cancel them.
The problem is very simple. Very simple. Desperate voices are not told there are cures of hopeless voices called spasmodic dysphonia, and a number of people, perhaps 1 to 3 million, is suffering the condition. Don't believe it's hopeless. I'm Mort Cooper. It's curable. Thank you, Dr. Curtis. Bye-bye.